eventually when I worked up the courage to talk to my parents about it and visit the school, I felt really happy about the choice that I made because now I'm doing something that I love.
Hello and welcome to Where the Living Room Used to Be, a podcast about Rhode Island's music scene. Hey everyone, it's James. For this episode, I had a nice long conversation with multi-instrumentalist Armand Aromin. We covered many things, such as what I would consider a unique inspiration to start playing music, his path to becoming a violin maker, and the approach he and his partner Ben take to playing traditional folk music. As always, I truly appreciate you taking the time to check this out. If you'd like, please follow @LivingRoomUTB on Facebook and Instagram to see some photos, show flyers, and more from Armand's time in music.
Can you talk a little bit about where you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in West Warwick, Rhode Island. So just 20 minutes or so south of where we both are sitting.
Yeah, which is Providence, Rhode Island, like Mount Pleasant, Providence, Rhode Island. Right?
Yes.
What was it like growing up there?
West Warwick, to me, growing up was my parents' house, my middle school, St. Joseph's, that private Catholic middle and elementary school down the street.
Yeah.
And the Warwick Mall, and that's it. And the Rhode Island Mall from the before times. To get my Santa picture taken.
Oh, yeah. You got to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when did music come into your life then?
So I guess technically music's sort of always been in my life.
Yeah.
But as far as me playing an instrument goes, the first time that ever happened was was it third or fourth grade recorder?
Oh, yeah.
And that didn't go well, which is kind of the usual story. And then didn't pick up anything for a long time. And it wasn't until my freshman year of high school that I took up the fiddle.
You took fiddle?
Yeah, fiddle. So there's kind of like a roundabout way of it where the summer after my freshman year of high school, I decided to start taking Tai Chi classes from this tailor shop that's right next to, was it called like World Liquors or something, right in Garden City? And so I would take Tai Chi lessons, and there was one day where my dad was paying for the lessons and I was looking at their like board of things that they offer, which included like ballet and guitar and knitting and crocheting somehow, and all these things. And one of the things was violin.
Yeah.
And so I switched from Tai Chi to violin, and Anna Lau was the woman who taught me, and she actually she never played the instrument herself. Like she never demonstrated, she never picked it up, but her son had taken Suzuki lessons back in the day, and she happened to have his old violin like in the closet of the tailor shop, and so she taught me how to play violin from what she remembered from those Suzuki lessons.
Wow.
Yeah. So I like learned from her for like half a year. And it was like super exciting. I loved it. And I think the reason why I was super enthusiastic about it was that like my parents didn't make me do it. I was the one who made that choice. And that's how it all kind of happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think inspired you to choose the violin? Like, were you listening to violin music? Were you listening to anything that you can remember that like drew you to that particular instrument?
It might have been anime.
Really?
I think so. I think like because it was my freshman year. I went to LaSalle Academy in Providence, so around the corner from us.
Yeah.
I didn't get that far away. So with my friend group at that time, it was all about anime, Japanese rock and pop, and anything related to that. This is way before the days of K-pop, and so I'm pretty sure it must have been from some of those bands where they like featured strings. Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what? And the other thing too is probably video game soundtracks.
Okay.
Like stuff from Final Fantasy, and Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
But there's just some really beautiful pieces in video game soundtracks.
Okay.
And for me, it was probably like Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 10. And so I was like heavy into video games during that time, and then like anime, J-pop, and J-rock. And so when I was looking at that board of things that the tailor shop offered, I think I was under the impression that the violin was this ancient old instrument that only the super rich can play or something, or it was just like, it's just something that wasn't a realistic option for me to take up, just because the schools that I went to had no real music programs.
Yeah.
So I was super excited about that, and I didn't realize that, like, oh, this is a thing I can actually do. And so that was my main motivation for switching over to violin.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, so I think the thing that kept me motivated to keep on playing was not only the stuff from the Suzuki books that I was working on, but also just video game themes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually haven't thought about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So where did you continue on after those lessons? You said it was like about 6 months or so that you were doing them at that shop.
Yeah. So then after that, I started taking lessons from Jeremy. Oh God, I'm blanking on his last name. But he's a violinist and violist in the Rick Orchestra, and he taught violin and viola at JR Music in Warwick.
Oh, okay.
So right by the Christmas tree shop, I think.
Yeah.
Pepperidge Farms.
Yeah.
Or maybe where the Pepperidge Farms used to be. I don't know.
But, precisely. Yeah. We got to get that in once every interview. So thank you. You've got it out of the way. So
yeah, exactly. So I took lessons from him for a while, but at the same time, like around that time, so half a year later, I was in the photography class at LaSalle Academy, and photography class was always before string ensemble, which I was also in. So I'd always go to the club and then drop off my violin by the door and do the photography things. And then at some point, Mr. Connors, who's the teacher there, Bill Connors, he just like noticed the violin. He's like, "Oh, would you be interested in starting a Celtic arts club with me?" And it's like, I have no idea what Celtic arts are, but I want to, if it means I get to play, then sure, I'm going to do that. And so he was the one that introduced me to Irish music, because he was taking fiddle lessons from a guy in Cranston named Jimmy Devine. I'm not sure if you know him, or do you know Hannah Devine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So Hannah's father, Jimmy, became my fiddle teacher.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, in Irish music. And so that's how I met Hannah, because Jimmy would teach group lessons, and Hannah and I were in the same group class.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, and so at the time, like, I just liked the idea of playing music. Anything was good enough for me, as long as I could read the music. And before I started taking lessons from Jimmy, he said, or I had found out that he would host house concerts at his house. So went out one night to see a group that was from out of town, and they were playing traditional Irish music. So there was 3 people. There was Tina Leck, Dana Lynn, and Junji Shirota. And Tina Leck, from Rhode Island, former student of Jimmy, but from quite a few years before me. And I believe she's Thai, and Dana Lin, she's Vietnamese, and Junji Shirota, he's Japanese. And so all three Asian musicians playing Irish music, and they call themselves the Rice Paddies, which is an amazing, like the best band name for Irish music ever.
Yeah.
Or maybe just any band. And so that was like my first time hearing Irish music was by three Asian musicians, and I'm Filipino, so that definitely made an impression on me.
Yeah.
That was kind of like my main motivator for really pursuing it.
Yeah, so were you playing at some of those house shows then, or?
No, never. I wouldn't like be performing for quite a while at that point. But I would go to all the house concerts there. Because I'd never gone to house concerts before. They were super fun. You got to meet everybody in the community, hang out, get to meet the performers, and just play tunes with them afterwards.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was just like such a nice and welcoming vibe and community. I really enjoyed that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the before times. So
yeah, getting together with people,
Yeah, I miss that.
Yeah. So then, when did you start performing yourself?
So I technically started performing at sessions around Rhode Island. So the first session I ever went to was at Ward's Public in Warwick, Rhode Island, or is it West Warwick? I forget. It was down the street from me.
Yeah.
And a fiddle player named Brad Maloney, he was the one who told me about it. And so I started going to this restaurant bar when I was like 14 or 15.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, back when smoking indoors was still a thing, which is such a strange thing to think about now.
Yeah.
And then about maybe a year or so later, I started going to Patrick's Pub. In Providence. On Smith Street. And so I guess that was technically like performances for me. Then before I went off to college, I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I started hosting the Irish session at Rhode.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of like where I got my start. And then being at Berklee, I, had a number of very random gigs. And also, like St. Patrick's Day would roll around in Boston, so I would go out and play a few of those, play a bunch of weddings, whatever people would pay me for. Yeah.
And were you still drawing upon like Irish music mostly, or were you starting to bring in other types of influences?
So yeah, I was going pretty hardcore Irish for quite a while. And then, freshman year at Berklee in 2007, spring of 2007, I met all the other folk musicians at Berklee. So I only really played and associated myself with fiddle players.
Oh, really?
But that's where like I first heard Swedish music, really got my hands on like bluegrass, some old time, like Scottish tunes, kind of just a little bit of everything. Old time. I was in the old time ensemble at Berklee. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those, or playing with a bunch of those folks, I definitely picked up little bits and bobs, and I still kind of have that in my playing now.
Yeah. So what drew you to Berklee then? Was it? It seems like a pretty awesome jump from picking a class off a list to going to Berklee.
Yeah, it was. I think by the time I had applied, I was only playing for like 2.5 years, and awesome. My teacher was like, "I'm not sure if you're gonna get in or if you should apply," and like that's totally understandable. Playing, someone playing for as long as I had at that point. But the other thing that I had since learned is that Berklee has a very high acceptance rate.
Oh, okay.
They like money, and they need to pay for expensive buildings and equipment. But I did go and I auditioned and like got a scholarship and all that. But one of my main motivations for going was I wanted to pursue music education, which is sort of kind of atypical route, especially for people who want to go to Berklee. Most people just want to do like performance or like music production and engineering.
Yeah.
But I figured that if I had just said I want to major in performance, like my parents definitely wouldn't let me. So I made sure to try to find something that was practical and maybe get a job. So the ultimate goal for me was to get a degree in music education and then go back to LaSalle and be a music teacher there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Clearly that didn't happen, which I'm totally fine with because I wouldn't be where I am now. And the other reason was that Boston, big Irish music population, and a pretty good and strong community there. And so I had a couple of ins. So I also wanted to be in Boston for like the social music outside of school.
Yeah. Were you starting to learn other instruments when you were there?
At Berklee?
At Berklee, yeah. I mean, I know you play other instruments now.
Yeah. So I think before I left for Berklee, I had taken up the banjo, clawhammer, like 5-string banjo.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was dating a guy at the time. We dated for like a month. We broke up. I broke up with him via text, which was such a high school thing to do. I would never do that now. And then the next day I went out and bought a banjo from Wakefield Music.
Yeah.
Which is, obviously that's what you do. And so I started teaching myself clawhammer banjo. So I kept that up throughout a good chunk of Berklee. And because I was in music ed, I had to take a bunch of other instrument classes. So I took a few semesters of piano. And I don't really do much piano now. I can do like the one famous theme from Final Fantasy X and a Billy Joel song.
Yeah.
That's like nice and slow and not too complicated. But it does give the impression that like it makes it sound like I know how to play piano, but I actually don't.
So, well, now everyone's gonna know because they're gonna hear this.
Yeah, and like I also ended up playing piano on 2 tracks of our latest release, and that was not intentional at all.
No, what do you mean? Like it needed something else, and you said just throw some piano on it.
Well, we didn't really know that it needed it, but we recorded our album at Stable Sound Studio in Portsmouth.
And this is with the Box Hunters, correct?
Yeah. And in the room where we would record vocals, I'd be like recording my harmonies, and because we'd just be running the track through, I would be standing right next to the piano, and I go, oh, well, I have, like 20 seconds to just plunk away, so I'm just going to do this just for the shits and giggles.
Yeah.
And then we all kind of realized, like, oh, this actually sounds pretty cool. Maybe we should do this.
Yeah.
And so I had to like dig back in my piano brain, just trying to like remember how to play piano. And like when I was practicing at home, like it sounded pretty good. And then by the time I got to the studio, it was a rough day.
Oh, really?
Trying to like record on like a real piano in time. It was a bit of a nightmare, but we got through it.
Cool.
Yeah, so I am glad that I did get some like formal piano training at Berklee.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then like I also took up trumpet for a semester, and that didn't go well because the mouthpiece seal was like broken or something, and my lip got exposed to the nickel, and so I had like a really bad reaction to it. And like my lips got super chapped for like 2 or 3 weeks. It was really bad, so I didn't really take up trumpet.
Yeah. Well, you seem like you're pretty good at all these strings anyway. So.
I'll stick with the strings. Like I did. Like I had to do a semester of flute. That was okay. But I also play tin whistle too, and that's much easier because of the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long were you at Berkeley? You
I was there for 5 semesters.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's see. After the first 3 semesters, I was pretty miserable. I'm pretty sure I was like depressed at that point. Like the thing that the highlight of my week while I was there during my second and third semester was when you can rent 2 DVDs for one at the Blockbuster on Mass Ave. And I would do that. I would either get like some obscure anime film or some like foreign gay drama or something and eat a pint of Ben& Jerry's. And that was the highlight. Which,
college is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, college is great. And I lived in a studio apartment. And so that was just like by myself. It was miserable. But so I applied to Rick. I even got in and I was about to transfer. But, I just happened to take, I signed up for the Celtic Ensemble at Berkeley. And it was there where I met a few other friends there, or people who would become my friends, my really good friends. And it was pretty much that, just hanging out with other people that kind of saved me from dropping out the first time.
Yeah.
And then I started taking music ed classes and realized I didn't want to be a music teacher anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why I ended up dropping out after my 5th semester. I applied and transferred to the University of Limerick in not Rhode Island, Ireland.
Ireland, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so I ended up going there in 2009, I think. I attempted to do the Irish music performance degree there. Absolutely hated it. It was a terrible program. No one ever go. Don't even go to Limerick in Ireland. It's a terrible place. I will tell you other places to go that are much better. Like,
what was the idea to go to Ireland and just be like, all right, this is going to be the place where all the music that you're playing, all the music that you're into is from. So it's going to just be that type of like learning from the motherland, so to say. And it just did not line up with that idea.
Yeah, that was the initial idea. And like prior to that point, I had been going to Ireland like once a year, like every summer.
Oh, okay.
So I was pretty familiar with just like traveling around there by myself. So I wanted to go because I knew people there. It was going to be a degree in Irish music, and I didn't know what else to do. So that's why I went out there, and I only stayed for 1 semester. It was so bad. I'm not sure if I said 1 year, but it was just the fall semester.
Oh, okay.
And, I also got a little depressed there. It was bad.
Yeah.
But that being said, I still did have a pretty decent time. I had a gig like every weekend in a different part of Ireland, which was a lot of fun. Definitely had some like strange gigs out there, and it was a time. Then I dropped out and I moved back to Providence. I was in Rhode Island for a semester and then applied to the North Bennett Street School in Boston for the violin making program.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was interested to find out how you got into making violins.
Yeah, it basically involved me going to different schools and dropping out a lot. And so Three's a Charm finally found like the right fit. And I knew it was the right fit because I visited the school and spent like a few hours there, and I already met like 2 fiddle players in the program. One of them was outgoing and was about to graduate, but I'm still in contact with her, Rose Clancy, out in Chatham, Massachusetts. She's super awesome. And then there's Cedar Stanistreet, who we were classmates for about like a year and a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like a small class, and I really enjoyed hanging out with them, got to play tunes with them, got to chat violin making. And it was really nice to meet other people who also just had fairly indirect paths.
Oh, okay.
A lot, like, everyone that was in the program, for the most part, had gone to college and decided actually what I did was not the thing I want to pursue anymore, or or it was just like a bit of a lost soul sort of situation, which was the category that I fell into, or somewhere in between. And before I applied for the school, I was a little hesitant about it because it's not a typical college. Like, you don't get a degree, you just get a diploma.
Okay.
And so there's like this, it felt kind of taboo, the idea of going to a craft school or a trade school. Mm-hmm. But, eventually when I worked up the courage to talk to my parents about it and visit the school, I felt really happy about the choice that I made. Mm-hmm. Because now I'm doing something that I love and struggling at the same time, but I still love it.
Yeah. What is it like being a violin maker these days?
Well, these days, I definitely don't have any work coming in.
Yeah.
But that's kind of fine at the moment because I decided I was going to go on like sabbatical, quote unquote sabbatical, for a few months because I wanted to try making a 5-string violin. And so in order to do that, I just need, time to myself, and I just need to hunker down and just get it done. So the pandemic actually makes it easier for me to be more productive because all my gigs are canceled. So I'm actually making some really good progress on the fiddle, save for some hiccups. But like being a violin maker in the before times, it was pretty nice. Just because since I'm also a musician that plays out and I also play my own instruments, I'm able to come in direct contact with folks who may need some work done.
Oh, okay.
So that ends up being the bread and butter.
Because you do like repair type stuff as well, right?
Yeah, repairs and rehairs. Those are the things that are going to pay a lot faster than making.
Yeah. How long does it typically take you to make a violin?
When I'm doing lots of repairs and I have a commission, it almost takes like a year or something. Wow. Because that's not only repairs and adjustments and rehairs, but it's also gigs. It's also teaching and like traveling and, random things like that. So it can be really tough trying to find time ever to make an instrument, but now is actually working out really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But normally somewhere between like 4 to 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to make one. And so far I'm in that window, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Definitely makes me feel good.
And how is that process? Like, how is it working with your customers and making your violins, and like what makes your violins? Like, is there a unique touch that you're bringing to them, or?
Yeah, definitely. When you're in violin making school, you kind of have to stick to the traditional violins, the ones that everyone's trying to copy, because they are worth copying, because the reason why Strads are because they're made really well, they sound amazing. Yep. And that's why whenever you look at a violin, you pretty much, if you with like factory instruments, if you look inside and you look at the label, it most likely will say something along the lines of like Cremonese copy, or copy of a Strad, or the Strad model violin.
Oh, okay.
Because Strads are, worth millions. So if you label something as a Strad, then it's gonna be more likely to sell.
I gotcha. Yeah. I
guess is the thinking. But you can only attempt to paint the Mona Lisa so many times. And there are definitely things worth copying and emulating. But I'm so bored by Strats. They're like the actual instruments themselves are beautiful, and I love looking at them. But I don't know. They bore me. They really do. I really love branching out and not being around the person that I learned under. It still feels like semi like taboo to try something different. But that's mostly what I've been doing for the past like 2 or 3 violins.
It's just figuring out like what works for you and like
just figuring out figuring out what is the thing that makes my violins. And there's really no set thing right now. I'm totally open to trying new things out. So for my last violin, if you look at a scroll, so the head of the violin, head on, they kind of have like those 2 little divot-y things.
Okay, yeah.
So that's called the fluting. So one of the things that I did, which it's such a small thing, but for me it felt like a big deal, is instead of 2 bits of fluting, I just did 1 curve.
Oh, okay.
And that makes visually, is pretty striking. For my 5-string, what I'm doing is I added an extra sound hole that was like a bit of a teardrop shape between the bridge and the end of the fingerboard.
Okay.
And I'm also using hop hornbeam for the fingerboard instead of ebony, which is what most violins usually have for fingerboard. Like ebony is in a bit of trouble at the moment, and so I decided to just source domestically. So there's a violin maker up in Brattleboro, Vermont, who just has hop hornbeam in his backyard. Wow. So he gave me a blank of it, and I'm trying it out. Hopefully I'm not going to regret it, but I think it looks pretty sexy. So I'm pretty excited about it. Just a lot of these things are kind of little, like to the average eye, you probably wouldn't notice the differences from one violin to another, but for me, they're like a big deal.
Yeah. Well, where else have you worked making violins?
So I also worked at McCartan Violins in the Hope Artist Village.
Okay.
In Pawtucket. After I graduated, I pretty much started working there, like in 2013 or 14 or so. And that's where I learned to do like a lot of repairs and setups. I also had like my own little workspace in the back, so I was able to make at least 1 violin while I was there. And before I left, that's when Morgan Eve started working there.
Yeah, Morgan Eve Swain.
Yeah, and so that's where we got to meet and hang out, and that was really nice.
Yeah, she's an amazing person, an amazing player. I've got to tour with her, so that's cool. Yeah, she's super cool. Someone who I'd love to have for a neighbor in Warren, Rhode Island. Yeah, nice. But I guess kind of moving on from there, though, like I'd like to get into some of the bands that you play in and have played in, and even just some of the projects that you're part of. So what was the first, I guess, quote unquote, official band that you played in?
Technically, it was my sophomore or junior year of high school, and I formed a trio with fellow string ensemble classmates. There's Kian Z, who he plays violin, and Danielle Bellevaux, and she played cello. And so we would, like, before string ensemble, we would always or on the off days, we would always like hang out under the stairs and just jam. And we formed this, like, I guess avant-garde string group. We were basically just making shit up. But we called ourselves Xylospongia, which are you familiar with the term Xylospongia?
No, but
so it is the sponge on a stick that Romans used to wipe their butts.
All right.
Yeah. So That was our group. And so we used to, we played once or twice at, what's the art gallery that used to be right by Patrick's Pub? Holden Street Gallery. Did you ever go there? Do you know Christian Calhoun?
Yeah, I know. I actually play in a band with him, but I never went to that studio there.
Oh, cool. So he was, I went to that studio for his open mic soon after he stopped teaching at LaSalle, because he used to be an English teacher there.
Yeah.
And that's how I found out about that open mic. And I think that was my first open mic.
Oh, okay.
And then I left Berkeley, and then before I left for Ireland, I introduced a bunch of friends from various circles to each other. And then when I came back from Ireland, a bunch of those people had formed a band. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool, but maybe I want to join. And so I ended up joining that band. And so that's a band that I'm still a part of now. And Ben, who's my partner in the Vox Hunters, he's also in that band now. It's called the Ivy Leaf. Not the Ivy League, the Ivy Leaf. Yes. And so Irish Music Quartet, it's me on the instruments that I play, and then Ben on like concertina, tenor guitar, singing, and Dan Accardi, who's from Warren, Rhode Island, who lives in Boston now. He plays accordion and concertina and fiddle. And our other bandmate is Lindsay Straw, she works up at the Music Emporium in Lexington.
Oh, okay.
She's amazing. She was my roommate at Berkeley. She plays guitar and bouzouki, probably banjo and mandolin. Great singer, amazing guitarist. She's so good. The other group that I have is a duo with my partner Ben, who is playing Pokemon behind me.
Hi, Ben.
So it's a group called the Vox Hunters, and we kind of play a little bit of everything, but at the moment we've been focusing a lot on music from Rhode Island.
I'm assuming you're talking about your new record that just came out.
Yes, fresh from the board. Music from the Ocean State Songster Volume 1. I have typed it out way too many times. Yeah, so when we first started playing, so we're also domestic partners. And so we started dating, when did we start dating? 2012, 2013?
Yes.
It was a while ago. But we were set up by a mutual musician friend, because, mutual musician friend, and started dating and playing music kind of at the same time, and that's how we sort of formed the group. And at the time, back in the day, we kind of just played, whatever. I only really played Irish music and a bit of old-time music at that point, but Ben grew up playing maritime music and Irish music, and also singing. And singing wasn't really a thing that I did much of. Like, I sang, but it was mostly just like a singer-songwriter kind of approach to things.
Oh, okay.
There weren't really any traditional songs that I found that really spoke to me in the Irish music world. But when I met Ben, that's when he really encouraged me to just sing more, lots of maritime stuff, English stuff, pub singy things that have choruses where people can join in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where, and that's where we kind of found our voice. and our sound. And that's kind of like how we base a lot of our performances around, is just some sort of audience participation. Not clapping on the 1 and 3, but singing along to the choruses.
Yeah.
And laughing along to our stupid jokes. Yeah, things like that. And we probably started doing like the Rhode Island music research maybe 3-ish or 4-ish years ago. I think when we started, or the reason why we got into it was because we'd be going to these festivals around, and a lot of the performers would say, oh, well, I got this song from my family out in Ohio, or this is an old logging song from Minnesota, or, something like that. And we didn't really have anything like that, So we decided that, like, oh, there's got to be Rhode Island songs. Rhode Island's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
There has to be something that isn't Rhode Island is famous for you. Which, is barely a Rhode Island song, because most of the verses are about other states, and it was written by New Yorkers, so it doesn't count. Yeah. But I guess like the Block Island Ferry jingle works. But so what we decided to do is we just into Google typed Rhode Island ballad, or just Providence broadside, just like any of these keywords. And it turned out that the internet is an amazing resource. And of course, because Rhode Island has a bunch of libraries and historical societies, a lot of the results pointed us to those places. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, librarians are the best. We consider them superheroes, and they are amazing, and they are our like best resources for trying to find out this stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. I played in a band that's similar to that. That was, we do sea shanties, and it kind of started that same way of just going to the library and just digging out records and stuff like that. So
yeah. Oh, is this for the PBD shanty thing?
Yeah. Well, I played with them when it was much louder and more punk rock, but yeah, Sharks and Cruise and Mark Lambert and stuff like that. Yeah. So
yeah.
So what was it like finding what you needed to find for these songs? Like, were you able to find old recordings and kind of learn from them, or were you finding sheet music of these songs, or what were you coming across?
Lots of sheet music and broadsides. So if you're not familiar with a broadside is like a very, very thin sheet, like tissue paper thin sheet of paper. That was sort of your way to get the news of the day. I think broadsides can be as old as date back from like the 1600s to like, I guess, turn of the century. And it was, your way to find out what was happening, what was the latest tragedy, who's got the best shoes. And a lot of it was usually put into verse.
Oh, really?
So, okay. Yeah. So we've found some broadsides. One is something along the lines of like a ballad written on the occasion of the death of this person who was killed by a log that rolled on top of them. And it's like 15 verses.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what's kind of cool about not that death is cool. I'm talking about what's cool about broadsides is that because audio recordings didn't exist, and sometimes not everyone knew how to read sheet music. So sometimes the broadside would say the title, and then underneath it would say to the tune of Yankee Doodle Dandy or something like that.
Oh, right.
A lot of broadsides have that, and we definitely try to avoid just singing Yankee Doodle over and over again.
Like, here's 10 songs that sound just like Yankee Doodle with different lyrics.
Yeah. So the cool thing about broadsides is that it was meant to be sung to whatever was the popular melody at the time.
Okay.
So sometimes the ballads would be written and you could kind of tell that it was a parody of something else. And I guess maybe at the time it was handed out, you didn't need to say what it was because the melody was on everyone's mind anyway. So for us, sometimes we have to do like a bit of digging, and Ben is pretty good about figuring out what the actual song is based on. But that's for us today. So if we were to get a broadside sheet that didn't have any melodies applied and it wasn't clear that it's parodied after something, the equivalent is us using the melody for like Sia's Chandelier, something like that. That would be kind of like the equivalent. And for us, what we would have to do is not only try to find the original melody, but if there was no melody supplied and we had no idea if it's referencing anything specific, we would try to find something to fit over it. And that's pretty fun because if we can't find anything, sometimes we'll just make up a melody.
Yeah. That was one thing.
Yeah.
It's like, or like, how much are you bringing from your own minds into this, playing these traditional songs, like.
Yeah, I guess quite a bit. I don't know. Sometimes we find that like if we listen to albums that are specifically made to be historical recreations of these songs from this period of time, it ends up kind of being a little like flat to us, not pitch wise, but just feeling wise.
Yeah.
Like it really just feels like, here's this museum piece that we have packed and crammed into a CD, and when you listen to it, you will hear the glass case. And behind the glass case is the actual thing. But for us, if we were to do that, if we were to try to recreate the sound of each piece and tune, everything would just sound completely different. Like it wouldn't sound like us. And we can't really bring ourselves to put on accents or change the way we play and change adapt ourselves to the tune. We make the tune or the song. We adapt it for us.
Yeah,
we make it suit us. So we don't really. So we're often changing lyrics. If there's a lot of like thee and thou, if it makes sense for the song, we'll keep it in. But sometimes we'll just say you.
Yeah.
You and yours. And a lot of the songs, because they're old songs and they're from a time in the past, there's, you'll occasionally come across things that are either misogynistic or racist or sexist or just not ideal to sing. So sometimes we'll just skip the verse, we'll change it, we'll do something to it. And I think as far as traditional music goes, that's sticking with the tradition. We're adapting it for modern times. Yeah. And I think that's what makes us really enjoy the material that we play, is that it's fun for us. And it's not just like we're putting on this play for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's cool. It's something that's tangible and living and up to date. It's a fun thing to do.
Let the bards from the north, from the south, east, and west all sing in the theme that suits them the best. Let them sing of baked beans, to their puddings and pies, their hot apple dumplings and donuts likewise. The bard of Rhode Island no theme can afford but to sing of hot Johnny cakes fresh from the board. Fresh from the board, fresh from the board, to sing of hot Johnny cakes fresh from the board. Our neighboring farmers may plow, sow, and reap, and raise crops of barley, of rye, and buckwheat. But the soils of Rhode Island our farmers adorn with potatoes and plenty and abundance of corn. With butter and cheese their cellars are stored, who relish hot Johnny cakes fresh from the board. Fresh from the board, fresh from the board, to relish hot Johnny cakes fresh from the board.
One thing I do also want to bring up is that the artwork for the latest record and the previous one is pretty incredible.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to bring that up. Like, could you talk a little bit about the artist and why you work with that particular person, other than it's awesome?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dan McDonald, he's an artist who's based out of Chicago, has no like Rhode Island roots at all, but he has come through and toured here because he's also a musician. His stage name is Spitzer Space Telescope, if you've ever come across him at all.
Okay.
And I first met Dan, I don't know, like 5 or 6 or so years ago. Do you remember a place called Leviathan Exchange? It's next. It's right. It's across from Classical High School, like where White Electric is, and that kind of strip. It was there. It was run by Phil Stewart and Tom Olson. Phil is Chrissy Stewart's brother.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like a kind of secondhand clothing exchange store that was really awesome, but it was also a place where you could perform, and so. That was the first time I met Dan, was when we were kind of booked for that.
Yeah.
Dan, he did the album art for both of our albums, for the first one that we released in 2017 and this most recent one. And, all done on a tablet, not actually wood block.
Okay.
But that would be amazing. But he does a really good job of making it look like it.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
Yeah, I just we had this idea and wanted to include a bunch of little references to things that we sing about throughout the album. So when you listen to the album and you look at the album art, you'll kind of notice these little things.
Yeah, it ties together.
Yeah, little Easter eggs.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you said that you recorded at, what was it, Stable Sounds Studio. It's in Portsmouth, right on like the Vanderbilt estate. Steve Rizzo. Do you know him? I don't. No.
He doesn't have an online presence, but he's been recording artists in Rhode Island since like the 70s or 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, he's from Rhode Island, and I think he's also like Billy Gilman's like studio, like he's where Billy Gilman records, and also Mike Renzi, who's the original piano player for Sesame Street. Yeah. So that and then I think Tony Bennett's piano player records with Steve. It's so weird because he also has recorded all the folk musicians from back in the day, which is also funny because he knows those folks from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I know the same people from the early aughts and onwards. Yeah. And, there'll be times where we'll be in the recording studio and we'll just go, hey, do you know, so-and-so? I'll go, oh yeah, I just saw them the other day.
Yeah.
And then he'll kind of just look off out the window and go, oh man, I just remember this one recording session. And it's just drugs and just like loud, crazy antics. Apparently a lot of these mellow friends now were less mellow back in the day.
Yeah. They're playing, these quiet folk people and really know how to party,
Yeah.
So how did you connect with him? Was it from that name in the folk scene, or like were you did you search this place out, or was it did it just kind of happen?
I honestly have no idea.
Okay.
I get it must, because he has no online presence, it must have been a mutual friend who was just like, oh yeah, it's, you got to go either with this person, this person, this person.
Yeah.
And Steve was like the top of the list, but was also the hardest to get a hold of. But now I have his number finally.
Yeah.
To the place, so it's called Stable Sound Studio because it's attached to a stable.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like you show up to the recording studio and there are horses running around outside. His control room, the back on the other side of the wall behind him, is the stable where the horses do all their running.
Yeah, like an actual stable. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You get occasional horse sounds.
Wow.
Yeah. None made it into the album, unfortunately.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool to have that, like especially with what you're doing,
Yeah, I know. I would love to get a nicely timed neigh.
Yeah, and some accidental clopping in the back, So, but
yeah.
As long as it's in time, So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. And we can move things around.
Yeah.
So
can you trot? Can you trot to this click track horse? Like.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of 7/8?
Yeah. That horse was nuts. It was doing some crazy timing out there,
Yeah. The benefits of having one short leg.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So what, other than having horses, what's the experience like recording there?
It's great. It's a very chill living space as well.
Really?
It's where he lives and he records. It's like nice and dim. There's some fun and strange, funky art and lots of funky couches and weird chandeliers. Lots of instruments. It's nice. I like it. I kind of prefer that over, just like a concrete room or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely. It also helps that Steve and us, we have like a good rapport, so we're able to joke around and keep things light.
Yeah,
especially when things get frustrating in the recording studio. It's, as much as I love that recording studio, I just hate recording. Yeah.
What is the experience like for you to record? I mean, I guess specifically with Hunters, but any bands, like what is the process like for you?
Trying. It definitely is. I mean, it's much easier to come in to do studio work. Yeah, I much prefer that, just because, I'm just there as my own person and I'm just here to add strings to the one thing.
Yeah.
It's, most of the track is completed or I don't have to worry about the other stuff.
Yeah.
But there's just more pressure on us because it's pretty much just the two of us. Usually singing, usually playing more than one instrument.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, it's hard to go from being on a stage or in a room exchanging energy with the audience to just someone saying, okay, here we go, now recording. And you suddenly have a microphone and headphones on and this is not what you're used to. And you can hear yourself in a different way. It's just a different experience. And it's just hard to try to get that same energy going. I would say that like the one comfort for us is that throughout the recording process for both albums, we've just like talked with other folk musicians, and as soon as we ask them like, oh, so what's it been like for you? They'll just kind of start off with a sigh and go, oh man, recording's a bitch.
Yeah.
It usually ends up being something like that.
Yeah.
So it makes me feel better that it's not just us. That seems to be a pretty common thing. Yeah, I'm definitely not ready for Nashville. Or never want to be.
Yeah. But you did bring up that you sat in with some musicians. Can you talk about some of the people that you've recorded with as well?
Yeah. my favorite one is it was my first recording gig at Berkeley. Is I was part of a string section for one of the Dropkick Murphys albums.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the album's called The Meanest of Times. It's the one with like the kid crossing his arms.
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah. If you look at the liner notes, my name's there. But cool. I'm not actually sure if you could hear the string section. But that's totally fine because my name is on the credits and that's kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But other than that though, it's been a lot of like local artists.
Yeah.
Do you know Emily Goldstein and Savino?
Yeah.
Yeah, so former Rhode Islanders, they just moved out to LA, which we're so sad about because we miss them so much. But like I've recorded on a few of their things, and some other friends. Morgan Johnson's another one. Yeah. And do you know Buck St. Thomas?
I don't. No.
He is part of Obie Howard, the group with his wife, Alex. So he's a film scorer.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I did some string work for some of his songs, and also his animated short that came out a few months ago, or like maybe half a year ago or so. And that was done in collaboration with a guy who's from Rhode Island originally and lives in New York City, and he's done a bunch of like animation for, I think like some now for like Adult Swim and Radiolab and things like that. But the short is called Eli, and it was actually it was shown at Sundance.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I was going to get to that point, but it's pretty cool. So my string playing is featured there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of just like a smattering of things. And a lot of that recording was done either at like people's home studios or at Big Nice Studios.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, one of my favorite studios to record. I like that space a lot.
Nice.
Cardinal, stay with the snow. You look best at your most vulnerable. Shock of blood, a blush on winter's cheek. Shameless, can you teach me?
Where do you typically play? I know you've said that you've done a lot of like the sessions at Patrick and stuff like that, but as Fox Hunters or as Ivy Leaf and stuff like that, like where do you typically play in Rhode Island?
In Rhode Island, so mentioned the Blackstone River Theater. So not only do we volunteer there, but also play there maybe like once or twice a season. We played at the Collaborative in Warren.
Yeah.
Super awesome gallery space. Hope in Maine, we've done 2 New Year's Eve events.
Oh, nice.
There, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Did that. So it was the way we set it up was we would do a 20 or 25 minute set with X performer. And as soon as that performer was done, the next performer would be in the back room and immediately start a 10-minute pub sing.
Wow.
And that would be the transition for, it would be a nice break for the audience and a way to engage the audience, to get them singing and do something different. And as soon as the 10 minutes was over, the next group would be on stage. And we would do that 2 more times, and then we would have a square dance. So we would start the square dance at around like 11:15, and at 11:45, we would teach a super easy square dance and count down to midnight. And at midnight, we would kind of play it in the new year, and everyone would do a square dance at midnight to Old Lang Syne as an old time tune.
Wow.
Yeah, it
That's super
worked out.
creative. That's cool.
Yeah, that was done in collaboration with Common Fence
Oh,
Music.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so we've played there as well. Lily Pads, yeah, in Wakefield and the Pump House. AS220, as everyone does. Oh, and do you remember 186 Carpenter Street?
I don't. No.
Oh man, it used to be a gallery space that was owned by a woman named Jory, who's in the What Cheer Brigade.
Okay.
But she owns a gallery on Sutton Street now. But it was one of my favorite venues. It was an art gallery space that was nice and small, wooden, right on the corner of a street, so people could walk by and see.
Yeah.
And you could just have concerts, events there. It was just like so cheap to use, and it was a really good community. We used to have an open mic there. Oh man, that was like our favorite venue because you didn't have to plug in.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you can play a place and it's just like show up with your instrument and it sounds good and it's kind of has that.
Yeah, house shows, house venues. Those are like our favorites. I much prefer them over like public music venues, but I also like playing at the music venues too because it's a nice way to support a business.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing any like live stream stuff or?
Yeah, we're doing a few. We're about to do some panel discussion about like folk musicians and dealing with technology in the now times.
Yeah.
We're probably going to be doing a streaming concert through Common Fence really soon, and we're also going to be doing a set for Bluegrass Pride at the end of June with our friend and our neighbor, including yours, who's new to Rhode Island, Jake Blunt.
Cool.
Yeah. So that'll be pretty fun.
That's nice.
Yeah, and we're also going to be doing contributing a 10-minute set to one of Chris Monty's side projects. He's doing you know Chris Monty, right?
Yeah. Is that the variety show that he's?
Yeah, variety show. Often plays at the Parlor as well.
Yeah.
But he's doing like I think a weekly show showcasing 4 different Rhode Island artists. 10-minute contribution. It's called Pandemic Baby because he's having a baby.
Yeah.
So doing that really soon. But yeah, it's been a little tough for us to get around to scheduling one just because we really rely on the audience interaction.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, honestly, it's just not as fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I do appreciate that a lot of people are hopping on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
learning how to harness it.
Yeah.
Or wrangle it, rather.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up about the bands that you played in, or anything else that I may have missed?
I mean, if you're interested in music from Rhode Island, or if you even want to know what Rhode Island music sounds like or could have sounded like back in the day, or if you want to know more about Rhode Island history, then check out our new album. What is it called? Fresh from the Board, Music from the Ocean State Songster Volume 1, which is the companion piece to our book that was released in 2018, which is the Ocean State Songster Volume 1.
Nice.
Yeah, so they work hand in hand. The book has... let's see here. I have it over here. The rough home copy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's just a little booklet. It was printed by DWRI Letterpress.
Yeah.
By Broad Street, and Hope Anderson is one of our landlords, who also works for Dan Wood at the letterpress shop. So that works out pretty nicely. But yeah, there's 29 songs and 27 tunes. It's got the sheet music and words, adapted and otherwise. And so if you have the book and you want to know how we would interpret some of these things, buy the album.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you can get that from our Bandcamp.
A pretty crazy endeavor of coming up with that as well, right? Like putting a book together.
Yeah, it was something that we had planned to do when we first started doing the research, and we thought like, oh yeah, like 10 years from now we'll just do that thing where we release a 5,000 page book.
Yeah.
And then realized it would actually sell much better and it's easier to carry if we just make booklets
Yeah.
in volumes. And then once we have, 20 volumes or whatever, then we'll make the big book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that, and also if so you can get that from our website, either thevoxhunters.com or thevoxhunters.bandcamp.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need any sort of instrument repair, or you want to pay me to make you a normal looking violin or a crazy looking violin,
with
then
gold on it.
Yeah, with gold leaf on it, you can contact me. My website is Aromin, Aromin, arominviolins.com, which I rarely update, but it does have a contact page. And just follow us on Instagram to stay up to date, because that's the thing that we keep up with the most, other than Facebook.
Cool.
Yeah.
What would you say is your greatest musical accomplishment?
I guess currently putting out this album.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's 18 tracks.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of them. But I think the other great musical accomplishment maybe for me is just building and being part of and nurturing the local folk music community here in Rhode Island.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that would probably be I don't know. It's weird to call that an accomplishment because it makes it sound like it was just me that was responsible for making it happen. But
but just being a part of that,
just being a part of it, and
these songs, you're reviving these songs, you're keeping some stuff alive, you're bringing a lot of attention to a lot of songs that haven't seen in a long time. So.
Yeah, and so going back to the music community, the other thing that we wanted to do, me and Ben, is start a pub sing and kind of foster a stronger folk music community in Providence and Rhode Island in general. So pub sings are these events where you go, it's a free event usually, should be. You show up to some sort of bar or restaurant and y'all just patronize the establishment, patronize in that good way, and just sing songs a cappella around beer and food and camaraderie and good times and sweet harmonies, or not so sweet harmonies, but it doesn't matter because it's all about being vulnerable with each other and just singing.
Yeah.
That happens a lot at festivals, and we wanted to make that happen in Providence. So a couple of friends, got a couple of pub sings started at Nickany's, and then we also started hosting them at Flatbread Pizza. And actually, before Flatbread Pizza, we hosted the last pub sing at Federal Hill Pizza around the corner.
Cool.
So. But pizza and pub sings aren't necessarily a thing, but maybe it's a Providence thing.
Yeah.
And if we move to Warren, maybe we'll do it at another pizza place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's been really cool because we've just seen a lot of growth in our friends who went from being, people who would probably say, oh, I don't think I'm going to lead any songs tonight, or I don't really have any songs. Call on me next time. To the same person, months later or a year later, just going all in and being like, I'm going to lead the song. Here I go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
really cool.
It's really, really cool. And it's something that has kept us relatively sane during this time.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Armand. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you in the neighborhood.
true host that New England can boast, from down by the sea unto highland. No state is more true or more willing to do than the dear little Yankee Rhode Island. Loyal and true little Rhodey, bully for you little Rhodey. Governor Sprague was not very vague when he said shoulder arms little Rhodey. Not backward at all at the president's call, nor yet with the air of a toady. The gay little state not a moment too late sent soldiers to answer for Rhodey. Loyal and true little Rhodey, bully for you little Rhodey. Governor Sprague was not very vague when he said shoulder arms little